This day really was a very unusual day. I started out thinking I was going to get some primer on Steve's parts. The rain came right at exactly the wrong time. I wanted to do some photo shoots and nothing worked out. It just was a disaster. So at the end of this video, after I threw the towel in on the weather, I took the pictures that I had taken from the previous day, and these are just photos and a couple of really short videos I took because we had so much rain in the last 4 days. Some of my friends up in Lincoln Park area had tremendous flooding, and while I was up there, I visited the train museum in Boonton and got some nice footage up there. So this promises to be a very eclectic day. We've had so many days of rain. Everything is still all wet and disgusting out there. But it's not raining now, so I thought I'd get started on Turbo Steve's, at least get the primer done today on his project. That's ready. I have a couple little things I wanted to show regarding the RD. Can do that too. And Karen's cooking away, so we've got to have, I hope, the first day of really nice spring. And there's a really nice thing happening all over the neighborhood. The flowering trees are starting to bloom, and we're on the verge of having a wisteria bloom, so it's a really wonderful time of year. Whether you go for a ride, or you paint, or you just enjoy the scenery. So if the day plays out the way I planned, I'll get some work done on Steve's stuff. I'll get the little thing I want to do on the RD done, and maybe even have time for a short ride at the end of the day. You never know, it's all dependent on the weather, but spring is truly in the air, and those flowering trees really give me some faith that we're going to have some nice riding time very soon. And it only lasts for a few weeks. Every time this time of year we get the tree in front of our house blooming pink, and right after that we'll get the wisteria blooming. That hasn't even started yet, but I always like to, at this point in time, anytime I see the trees in full bloom, is get out the camera and get some pictures and put some of the bikes out in front of the house. These are good memories when winter comes. Now the last few times I rode the RD, I always have a clock with big numbers. Because what I like to do is, Karen will usually tell me what time she'll have lunch or whatever, what time she'd like me to be back. So I have a window. Let's say the window is 4 hours. Well, I know from the clock, I can say if I leave at 10, it means around 12 I got to turn around and start heading home and be back at 2. So I can keep track of I always keep track of my time. Now, obviously, I'm not easy rider. You throw your watch away. People at a bachelor's do that. Well, they can. I can't. But anyway, and these, I found out one thing about these. I have these on pretty much on every bike, but what happens is some of them, when you put the battery in, they don't work. And I don't know if these go bad or what, but they're so inexpensive. I ordered 3 of them. There were 3 for $12. I'm just going to put brand new ones out, not even fool with them. See what happens on some of them, you can see they start to fade away, and it's usually the battery. A lot of times you can put the battery in. I have a whole handful of batteries. But then some of them, when you put the battery in, they don't work at all. Maybe they just burn out and it isn't even the battery. I don't know. But every one of the bikes has a clock on it, and I'm going to replace the ones that have gone dead. It's this time of year. And I always like to know, in this case, this bike doesn't have a clock. Some bikes have a clock, like the R1. The letters are so small, I can't read it while I'm riding down the road. So it's just, and the MT-09, that quartz clock worked out great. So this little quartz clock, this worked out great. I went to buy another one, and they don't have them anymore. I should have bought 3 or 4 when I had the chance. These are really nice. Nice, big, bright numbers. You can read that in bright sunlight. So it's time to feed the fish, have some coffee, see how the day is going to play out, and maybe get a short ride at the end of the day, if it doesn't pour too bad. So it looks pretty iffy, but I think we'll be able to at least get the primer on Steve's part and just see how the day's going to play out here, whether we're going to get a ride or not. Okay, boys, who wants to go for a motorcycle ride today? Oh, you'd rather eat, huh? You mean if eating is more fun than going for a ride? Oh, you guys are so cute. So cute in the morning. Come on, it's time. They are totally out of hibernation now and eating 3 times a day, like me. It's a lot of work feeding all these barnyard animals, but so much fun in the morning. And Karen's getting ready to cook, and I'm getting ready to have coffee. So Steve's parts are pretty much ready for primer. We should at least be able to get the primer done today. no matter what the weather is. But I want to get those clocks done first. So this is pretty much what you get for $12 from Amazon. You open the box up and there's 3 of them. And all the directions are in I guess Chinese. I don't know, but anyway, these are pretty nice units. And I bought some from AutoZone that were, I don't know, they were not as nice. These seem a little bit nicer. And like I said, if you have a chance to get that quartz one, it's even better. Now, what's nice about this, these come out. There's a little tray, I guess if you had it in a car. And it's got a little sticky thing on the back. Well, I can't use that. But what I'll do with these, and you got to, of course, set the time. These I can just put a couple of drops of epoxy on them. And when I want to take them out and change the battery, heat it with a hairdryer and remove them. But these are really nice. And they basically come out to about $4 a piece. And I don't know that thing about the batteries. That's mysteries to me. All this electronic stuff is mysteries. Some get rejuvenated, and some, when you put the battery back in, they're done for the day. Oh, it does not look real good. It is not looking real good for painting today. I don't know about this. Yeah, at least we got all the clocks installed now. We'll be good for another 5-6 years before those batteries go dead. Now, unfortunately, we've run out of time and it has started to rain. So because it's starting to rain, I can make up the handle for this, and there's a trick with drilling these holes. If you take a 1/4-inch drill, sometimes it makes a messy, it catches and everything. A really good way to do this is with a Dremel tool. And they actually just burn their way through. And I want to sand this a little bit on the inside now that the epoxy is hard. Get that nice and smooth. And we'll be ready to prime that if it ever stops raining. Any one of these bits that's going to be appropriate for the size hole. This is a much better way to do it with a Dremel tool than with a drill. And it just makes a nicer hole. And then we'll be able to dress this off and sand this little area in here, fill out with some CA, because you can see if you look from the top, this has kind of a funny little, because this is spread apart. Well, we'll straighten that all out, especially because we have this time here right now. You see how nice and neat that makes the holes there. That's just a really good way to do it. We'll sand this smooth. Now, it was really interesting because I got to talk to Steve last night over dinner, and what we did, he's got the engine in the frame already, so he's really rocking and rolling here. But it looks like we're going to have to work around some crappy weather today. Now, anytime I do one of these carbon fiber repair reinforcement issues, I always, at the end of it, I want the epoxy to dry overnight, number one. I don't want to sand it until it gets nice and hard. And then I want to get rid of any little splinter or anything on it, because what happens is that any little splinter or thread that's sticking out of the epoxy, and when you go to work on a bike, or you even painting it, you can catch it under your fingernail or something. So I always like to just work with everything nice and smooth here. It only takes a few extra minutes. And it just gives it a much nicer look and more fun when you're putting the bike together. See this funky little area here. If you look real close, now I don't know that you would even see this. This is a carbide cutter. And we'll be able to see how that dip in there. We'll be able to sand that right out. And then I'll fill this with some CA. Now, I wanted every little detail on this job to be taken care of before we actually do the paint or the primer. There was a little nib sticking out of the top of the fender. I tried to work on that a little bit. This little edge, the odds are pretty good nobody would see this except me, or maybe Steve, I don't know. But the point that I'm trying to make here, it only takes a few minutes. It takes less than the time it takes to feed the birds to get it right and get it nice. And then when it's all put together and it's all polished and waxed, and you're out there with your friends in the bright sunshine, and nobody says, oh, what's that little crack down there? Oh, what's that little something? It just always, to me, it just this is the time of doing a job like this. This is the time you've got to really, really be fussy. And this has to be perfect before we wind up putting the paint on and being sorry we didn't do this. I'm just going to put a couple of drops of CA on here and then sand it. The sanding dust will fill the bond pretty quickly too. There we go. And what happens is the little particles that you sand off wind up mixing with the CA and making like what amounts to be CA Bondo. And that will be virtually invisible when that's all painted up and the clear is on it and everything. But this repair, I think, ensured that somewhere down the road there won't be this crack going up into the fender or some other thing. Because the bottom line is, I know Steve is going to be riding this bike, and when you ride the bike, this is what happens. Scratches, dings, nothing you can do about it, and cracks. Next thing is to come up with some kind of handle. We put a bolt through, and I want to get some way of holding this. There we go. Now the only sad thing is this is the part where they injection mold, and I tried to sand to smooth it out, but it's really a divot. I don't want to put Bondo on it. There's a chance it'll crack, and it's really not in a spot that it's going to be obvious, but I hope that doesn't show through, and if it does, I'll have to do some cosmetic repair. But anytime you put Bondo on plastic, good luck, Charlie. Now the primer that I'm going to use on this job, it's primer sealer to seal against the Rust-Oleum primer that Steve put on, but be aware, I have had a lot of the cans in this batch where they've about a third of the way through they start spitting and that tip is clogged up. One of the tips that I've heard is warm the paint in a jar of a cup of warm water. I don't know if that's going to help. I didn't do it today. It's still plenty warm here. It's about 65 degrees, but in the winter that might be a factor. I don't know. Maybe it's worth trying at some future time too. Anyway, we're always trying to share useful information. If you have any information about these tips, let me know. Meanwhile, I want to get out there and get this done before it really starts raining. Now, it looks like it may have stopped for a few seconds, and I thought if I can just get some primer on this, well, in between the raindrops, it doesn't really matter. I can't do any colored painting today. Primer, I can always sand off and put more primer on. I wouldn't want to paint anything, the good paint that's going to stay on a bike, but getting a coat of primer on this will be a big step. We can see how that little repair worked out. Get an idea how this whole thing is going to play out. Now the idea as always is to get on the thinnest possible coat of primer. There's plenty of primer on here already. The one thing you don't want to do is build up 8-10 coats of primer to where the paint is thick. Thick paint cracks. Thin paint tends not to crack. This is a plastic part that's flexible. When it gets cold, it's going to shrink. When it gets hot, there's all kind of things going on with plastic that are more defined than when you have a solid piece of metal. So this, a flexible plastic part, I want to try to keep the paint as thin as I possibly can, and still have at the end of it that I have enough clear on it to buff it out from time to time. And as the day played out, it just got worse and worse and worse. And so sometimes you lose, sometimes the weatherman wins. So I did manage to get a coat of primer on this. Now I can't bring anything into the house because my grandson is still living here. And I'm just looking at this. This doesn't look like it's going to be a problem with any compatibility or anything. But again, to be painting paint that you're going to actually see on a day when it's this so likely it's going to rain, not a really good idea. So I think what I'm going to do is cut my losses. Karen has some things she wants me to do. And maybe I'll look for some video that I can put on the end of this that'll make for an entertaining afternoon for you. But I think we're well on our way to having this job ready. But every step of the way, we've had 4 bad days of rain. You just can't make this up. It's just horrible, really. So all I can say is we'll come back to this tomorrow and live to fight another day. So these are some photos from the previous day, which got a little convoluted because we had doctor appointments in the morning and the afternoon, and I really didn't have a nice big block of time. So I thought one of the things that would be worthwhile doing, for me anyway, is get some photos. The wisteria is coming up on full bloom very soon. The forsythias are blooming. The trees out in front of in our neighborhood all over. The flowering trees are blooming. It really is a nice time of year. But when you don't have a giant block of time, you can't plan out a 3 or a 4 hour ride. But one of the things I was able to do is get some nice pictures today. The flowering trees are everywhere. It was a wonderful day to shoot pictures. And another thing I had in my mind, I wanted to go back up to to Boonton, to the place where I think it's the Lackawanna freight station. They had some old trains there, some 50s diesels last time I was there. And it seems like every time you go there, they're working on something, but you never can figure out. It's locked and there's signs you can't get in. And so I was kind of curious how that was going to play out, if I could sneak up there today. Not a high priority thing, but something I really wanted to do, because I'm of course have an interest in trains too. And the last time I was there, I walked around and I just couldn't figure out how you get in. But this is in Boonton, right near the train station, of course. And they had this looks like a 50s or a 60s diesel, similar to the one I have on my model railroad. I'm not sure if it's what it is, what the correct number of it is, but I know the GG1, and they have one in Harrisburg in the museum, and they have one here that looks like it's getting ready to be restored, and it looked pretty cool. Now, we had just gotten through a tremendous rain, 3 or 4 days of rain, and oh my God, everything was muddy. This ride wasn't really worth making a ride video out of, because there was so much mud on the road and debris and everything, but that GG1 made my day complete, and that is a rarity to see them. That is quite a unique thing to have one of them. They have a little switcher engine in the back, and that's the freight station right there, and that's the road that goes into Boonton. And of course, it's a very short ride from my house to go up there, no matter if you go by car or by motorcycle. But here's the other thing is, the roads, if you look on the side of the road here, they're just muddy and wet and yuck. And I wanted to go through Lincoln Park. Several of my friends live in Lincoln Park, and they get hammered with flooding every time we have heavy rain, and this was no exception. The rain was coming out into the road in spots. Some roads were shut. It was a real mess. So I hope you did enjoy the video. We try to post something up every day. We hope the weather's going to be better for the whole summer, in fact, and forever for you too. And try to keep our life non-political, a lot of fun to watch, and enjoying motorcycles to the max.